And we're back now with former Secretary of State James Baker, who is in Falfurrias, Texas this morning. Mr. Baker, thank you for joining us. You were part of the Reagan administration back when President Reagan vetoed the Anti-Apartheid Act that Randall Robinson discussed here just a minute ago. I wanted to ask you, did Ronald Reagan ever come to regret that veto? It was overridden by the Congress and sanctions were put on the South African government. But how did President Reagan feel about that as time went on?
Well, I'm sure he did regret it, Bob. In fact, I'm certain that he did. It was, after all, I think the only time that a veto of his had been overridden, or was overridden in 2 terms, I believe. And so certainly he regretted it. On the other hand, once that happened and control of South African policy passed to the Congress, President Reagan was really determined to meet with and deal with the question of, meet with the black leaders of South Africa and deal with the problems of apartheid, and he was able to do so. I had the privilege of meeting with Nelson Mandela in Namibia on the occasion of Namibian Independence Day, just 3 short weeks after he had been released from prison. And I have to tell you that I was really amazed at the soft-spokenness of this man, at the conviction of this man, at the dignity of this man. He had an enduring and endearing presence of dignity that I don't think I've ever seen on any other person. And I just have always felt that this was an extraordinarily beautiful human being who became, of course, an icon of freedom, of human rights, and of reconciliation. How many people forgive their captors when they've been kept in prison for 27 years? And as Maya Angelou said to you earlier in the program, had it not been for Nelson Mandela, and by the way, F.W. de Klerk, there would have been blood flowing in the streets when apartheid ended in South Africa. But because of Nelson Mandela and F.W. de Klerk, apartheid ended peacefully.
Now, that was after you became Secretary of State, when you met with him, and by that time George H.W. Bush was president. But tell me a little bit about the meeting with F.W. de Klerk.
Well, after I met with Mandela in Windhoek, Namibia, I went to Pretoria, South Africa, to meet with F.W. de Klerk. First time I had gone to South Africa as Secretary of State. And as a matter of fact, during my meeting with Mandela, he was not happy with the fact that we were going to meet with F.W. de Klerk. But our position was we want to try and work with him constructively to end apartheid. Mandela didn't want to see us do that. As it turned out, it ended up being the right thing to do. But when I met with F.W. de Klerk in Pretoria, at the end of our meeting, he called me into a room, just the 2 of us, and he said, "Mr. Secretary, I want to tell you something. I am going to be the last white president of South Africa." That was a startling statement at the time, if you think back to 1990. And as it turned out, of course, that was correct.
Why do you think it took so long for them to take Nelson Mandela off the terrorist watch list? I mean, they had to get a waiver for him to come into this country. I think he finally wasn't taken off until, what, 2008?
Well, I don't know the answer to that, Bob. I really don't. I don't remember, frankly, all the facts regarding that. He did come, he came, I thought, before 2008 and made one visit.
Oh, he did, but they had to do a waiver to get him into the country.
Well, that's probably correct. I do know this. He came to my institute, the institute that was named for me at Rice University in Houston, Texas in 1999. And just to give you a sense of the greatness of this man, a 12-year-old boy asked him after his presentation, "How do you want to be remembered, Mr. Mandela? Everyone talks about how you're almost a saint." And Mandela said, "Son," he said, I'm no saint, I'm not an angel, he said. In fact, I'm no saint unless you consider a saint to be a sinner who keeps on trying.
All right.
And I thought that was a wonderful encapsulation of the person.
Well, that's a wonderful way to end this. Thank you so much for being with us, Mr. Secretary.
Yeah. Thank you, Bob.
Back in a minute.